Latiya City Expats Club is a non-profit social organisation and our speakers are volunteers. The club as such assumes no responsibility or liability for the professional reputation of or the quality of services provided by the speaker today.
Bonus. Now, next week, firstly, we've got a very good speaker on something that's of deep interest to all of us, the Thai law and you. I'm hoping to clarify what are actually some of the actual laws of the road, now that I've been driving for a few years, because I am mystified as to what laws some Thais are driving to. So that'll be a very, very interesting talk. He's a very knowledgeable lawyer. And also, we've all heard about this possible tax on foreigners' income. I booked in our gurus on taxation, etc. from Bangkok for the 1st of November, and because they were down here today, they've sat in. Come up, Ken, and say a few words. Ken and Lee and Thomas and everybody, come on up briefly. Obviously, it'll get clearer by the 1st of November what all this tax stuff is about. Don't count on that. Yeah, welcome to Thailand. So, many of you have seen these guys before, incredibly knowledgeable about tax and other matters and investment opportunities in both, especially for US people and British people, British subjects. Do you want to say a couple of words about this proposed tax on income? Thomas, go.
Okay guys, I'm going to skip the introductions on myself because you guys already know who I am. The law, as it used to say until about 10 days ago, was that income that is remitted into Thailand after 12 months in a bank account is savings, not income. And therefore, the loophole that you could drive an aircraft carrier through was that all you had to do was take all of your income, put it in a foreign bank account for 12 months, and the Thais would consider it savings, and no tax on income tax whatsoever. Now, if you have been remitting your pensions in on each month to Thailand, you were supposed to be going to the Thai tax authorities and reporting this, and believe it or not, pay Thai tax on this for the foreign tax credits. We actually had individuals who tried to do this, and the Thai Revenue Department said, and I quote, "Leave, we don't know how to do that." With this. So, one of the big issues here is the new government's come in, and one of the ministers announced that they're going to just close this loophole, and any income you remitted in, no longer how long it's in a bank account, is going to be subject to tax. Okay? With 3 exceptions that were listed in this one paragraph statement. The 3 exceptions were listed: tourist visas, temporary work permits, I've never seen a temporary work visa on this, and countries with double tax agreements. Now this gets really, really complex. Britain, by the way, the United States, and most European countries do have tax treaties with Thailand. But does that mean that if it comes from the United States, there's a double tax agreement, it's free of Thai tax? Probably not. What it more than likely means is that each country that you have a double tax agreement with, you would have to fill out a Thai tax return, and you'd be able to get the tax credits for taxes that are paid in that country via the terms of each and every tax treaty. There are 61 of these. But most European countries, and even the United States, have higher tax rates than does Thailand. Worst case scenario, folks, you got to get a tax ID number when you get your retirement visa, and you have to file a Thai tax return to this. There's probably one firm in the world that probably knows how to do this, and I've got about 6 Thai accountants. And if that goes, I'm going to have to go to 40 or 50 Thai accountants that are trained just how to do this. And this is everybody. Now, that's one range of possibilities. They could say, you're on a retirement visa, you're exempt from the Thai rules. Because the reality of this, folks, is this wasn't meant to go after expats who are living here. This was meant to close a big loophole that very wealthy families have been using for generations. They're very short on income. They're promising this money out to every Thai citizen. This is a way to incentivize money to be taxed that comes back in here, and to incentivize wealthy Thais to invest in here. Right now, if a Thai goes to the U.S. and opens up a U.S. bank account and gets bank interest of close to 5% on a CD right now, then by U.S. law, they don't pay any tax on that interest. How do the Thai banks compete against that? If, by the way, a Thai goes and opens up a U.S. stock brokerage account and buys shares of NVIDIA Corporation and has made $500,000 on that, by U.S. law, guess what? No capital gains tax for non-U.S. nationals. The incentive has been out there for these guys to invest overseas instead of in Thailand. This theoretically pushes that money back into Thailand because it's taxed in a fair way for the Thais. But, and here's the big but on this, okay, they have stated that this will go into effect on January 1st, 2024 for that tax year. If you want to buy a house or anything, or you're going to buy a truck, go ahead and move the money in before then to make sure the rules don't get. However, are they going to be able to produce 5,000 to 10,000 pages of documentation that will be needed for all the potential permutations of this by January 1st? I think I have a better chance of getting struck by lightning 4 times before I go back to Bangkok with this. There is no way in hell that's going to occur. But, worst case scenario, they don't come up and say in a month, 2 months, 3 months, we're suspending these rules until 2025 enforcement with this before we write the rules. If they do that, you don't know whether or not they're going to enforce these rules for 2024, what the rules are. They haven't been written yet. Could they come up in December of next year and suddenly do tax rules on this? No one knows. Again, this was one very, very short paragraph that is very, very short details. Now, there are some things that are like the 10-year elite visa that has free, that guarantees you to be free of taxation. And they've moved in the past and said digital nomads will not be taxed here on their national income and stuff. But that's the old government. We're in the new government, guys. No one really knows what the permutations of this are going to be, except the safest way to do this, bring your money in prior to bringing any money in next year, because, again, I don't know, I may not even have said this, it's only on income remitted into Thailand. So funds you bring into Thailand are the only things this tax is going to be issued on. If you can bring in a chunk of money before next year, go ahead and bring it in and plan on living off of it.
What about funds that are not income, like an inheritance? Is that going to be treated the same way? If it was not taxable income in the source country, it was not the right.
Okay, the question of what is income and not income, based upon this, and when in inheritance issues, zero guidance. They could sit there, worst case scenario, they could sit there and declare every dollar that comes in, including inheritances, sale of a house 20 years ago, as income, and it's a remittance basis, they're going to charge tax on a percentage of the rate to that. Worst case scenario. Now again, this is part of the reason why I say 5,000 to 10,000 pages of regulations in this. You sold a house 20 years ago. Is that income when you finally bring that money into here? Theoretically, the way they've written this, yes, everything is income to you. But common sense is going to have to come into this on when that comes into this. But guidance right now, zero, folks. Oh, no. So, safe way to do it, bring money in by January 1st. Let's see what happens over the next year.
How does the foreign income tax credit?
Just wait a second.
Have the money. How does the foreign income tax credit from Thailand and the States and whatever, how does that going to work into this whole deal?
We got a mixed multinational group in here, but generally by the tax treaty, almost all of them will say, they'll source the income from one country to another. Okay, interest is taxable first in the United States, and then Thailand has to give a tax credit back for that interest. Okay, so if you're paying 25% tax in somewhere in the EU on the income, and it's only taxed here 20%, you're not going to have to pay Thai taxes, but more than likely you'd have to fill out a tax return and show that income being being taxed in that particular way. So the biggest issue of this is the highest probability, there's two. One, they exempt expats on retirement fees. That, truthfully, is probably the most likely thing they do for the expat because it gets too complex. Secondly, they sit there and say, money you bring in, you have to fill out a tax return and justify the taxes that have been paid on that money, either current year or some year in the past with it. But tie tax liability will be pretty minimal.
Thomas, you talked about Social Security. And let me go back. Thomas did talk about his credentials, but Thomas has he was the international guy for U.S. taxes. But going further for everybody, Thomas has a master's in international tax and finance. And our specialty for Americans is dealing with the tax treaty between the United States and we deal with the tax treaty between the United States and Thailand. So Thomas, reading those tax treaties is pretty interesting, you know. So Thomas has the expertise that he can deal with the treaties really for everyone going forward. So we will come back and constantly update you guys on the treaties, how it pertains to each country going forward. But if you can talk about Social Security and...
Yeah, one advantage of the U.S. tax treaty is that Social Security is only taxed in the United States. Okay, so if you have to use a tax treaty and you're bringing in out of that 65,000 bottom, majority of that is U.S. Social Security, it will be free of tax as long as they're not doing a blanket type thing. What they may do is they may say, there's various options in this. Option A, you're taxed on 65,000 baht, but you filed no tax return in Thailand. This would be the minimum amount of tax you have to pay, for this. Option B, you start using the tax treaties and you file a tax return. Potentially, that could even be more costly than option A. You know, again, there's no rules and regulations on how this is going to work out. But, how to describe this? If you want some fun reading, you can go read your local tax treaty with this. And you'll find a whole lot of stuff that's about as clear as mud on it. They're very legal contracts between this. Now, one more issue with this. We've already begun working on strategies on how you would do this to avoid Thai taxation. You could theoretically, at this point, work on setting up a pension account in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong has a very, very strong tax treaty. Pension income and income that's sourced out of Hong Kong is only taxable in Hong Kong due to the U.S. Hong Kong tax treaty. So theoretically, if you want to move a substantial amount of money in, this works for Americans, Brits, and pretty much everybody. You could set up a Hong Kong pension account, move the money into there, and then bring the money into Thailand and daisy chain your tax treaties. The good part of this for Americans is you'd still be subject to the U.S. Thai tax treaty on the distributions from the United States, and you can live free of U.S. tax because you can withdraw your pension income free of U.S. tax by the tax treaty, and then you avoid all Thai taxation as it flows through. It's theoretical at this moment, but this is one of those types of things we're working on for people who have to move large amounts of money. We had one gentleman who was British yesterday. He's getting about $4 million next year. This is potentially how he would do it to make it safe for him. There would be workarounds on this, but again, you can't really figure out the exact workaround yet because you don't know the rules yet. But those rules are probably not going to come into effect next year. This is probably a 2025 issue, and filing a tax return 2026 at the earliest.
So right now, in terms of assets, Lee and I constantly are accommodating expats. So you could, you may get out of this with a tax treaty with the country that you're from, as well as maybe the country that you hold assets into. But going back to this point about this and the taxation for Thais, Thailand is starting next year the CRS system, which we're already a part of, where all our monies are reported. And I'll let Lee talk a little bit
Common
about
reporting standard, by the way.
Yeah, so before, when we looked at bank accounts, when we look at anything financial, the companies now, they always request a tax identification number and the country you're paying tax in, right? So up to sort of this point, if we put down a Thai tax ID number or you're resident in Thailand and you're subject to potential taxes here, it kind of got ignored because Thailand wasn't a part of the system, so you sort of fall through the holes in the system there. From January next year, they're going to bring in CRS here, which means they're going to get all the information sent in about anything that's got a Thai tax ID number on it. Now, are they set up enough to deal with all this information immediately? Probably not. Is it just going to bombard them with it and probably get lost? Maybe. But the potential is there for them to come back in the future and say, hold on, you've got this and you haven't declared it. So the tax changes are possibly a part of that, they're possibly not. My feeling is it's just directed at Thais and they didn't even think about expats when they announced it. And I agree with Thomas. You know, Thomas is saying he may have to employ 50 accountants to deal with the tax returns. Well, how many people are the Revenue Department going to have to employ to deal with the tax returns, right? How many are they going to have to train up to do dual tax agreements and understand the implications of them? There's a lot of work in the background here that they haven't considered. How will it affect visas? If they tax you 65, well, are they going to put the amount up because it's disposable as opposed to the money you're bringing in, or will they accept a lower amount of disposable income to get the visa? All these kind of things come in. In terms of the trust in Hong Kong, it is an excellent way to hold money. There's a dual tax agreement that comes across. For anyone from the UK here, any money that goes in it also comes out of any inheritance tax bill if you get caught up with that in the UK. And the UK are very focused on getting as much money in as they can from inheritance tax. Okay, there's talk they might get rid of that, okay, but if they do, they're going to replace it with something that brings in even more money. So, you know, it is a great time with this taxing to come in to assess your finances, work out the best way that you can receive your money by removing it from any potential liability that may or may not come in and may come in the future as opposed to January. But assess what you got, have a look at it. We're always here if you want to talk it through. We can come up with some suggestions for you, see if they meet your requirements, okay, and then we can take it from there.
We're back in 4 weeks.
Yeah, 5 weeks, I think.
And obviously, we've been very loyal to you guys have been loyal to us. We'll come up and make sure within 2 weeks, if there's an announcement, we'll be up here trying to give you guys as much information as possible. Don't panic right now.
Yeah, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic. So thank you so much. I mean, these guys came up. Just let this in, okay? They were just sitting here because they happen to be in Pattaya today and they like to drop in when they can. And I went and said, come up on stage and say something about the new tax thing. And they gave you all this information off the top of their heads. Very, very impressive. Thank you so much, Thomas. So 1st of November, they'll be back here. Hopefully things will be clearer. They're obviously tremendous assets to be able to draw on, etc. So, and now, finally, we're on to Big George and Open Forum.